Hey everybody, this is Dennis, and welcome to another episode of the Grounded Reason podcast, where Joel and I discuss things like cord cutting, saving money through technology, and how the internet can be used for a force of good in the world. Yeah, that sounds good. Today we're going to be discussing Congress pretty much wiping out everyone's internet privacy.
Yeah, nothing big.
And all the progress, we've probably made when it comes to ISPs and pulling some of their unlimited monopolistic powers away from them are kind of dwindling now, it seems, after this move.
It's honestly like really depressing.
It really is.
It really is.
So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to get to how you can do some things on your own to mitigate some of these privacy checks that have been erased. And, we'll also get into a bit of history on how all this came about and try to clean up, because there's a lot of hyperbole out there right now on both sides. It's basically, if you feel like Joel and I, you'll hear things like, the ISPs are going to be able to take all of your information and put it in a jar and sell it to your enemies.
Yeah, the ISP stole my car.
Right.
And
but if you hear the other side, they're saying that these poor ISPs are hurting so bad and because of Obama's and all the regulations they put in place,
playing in the background.
Right, that the internet's going to have to be turned off because they're out of money.
Right.
And they need this so they can compete or so they can profit or something.
Right. And so I would argue, one, I'll take exception with that philosophy that someone would espouse, because the whole point is they're monopolists. They're not competing with anyone.
They aren't.
Right?
They really aren't.
I think they're doing just fine.
They're oligopolists.
I know.
But yeah, in most areas, they do have regional monopolies where there's pretty much one place you can go to get internet access.
And that's really why we've talked about this ad nauseum, but you have to look at the particular market and discuss it that way, right?
Right. It's not an all or nothing thing here.
But getting back to the main point is that the truth about how bad this is somewhere in between the two polar opposites that Dennis just went through.
Yeah, so we're going to get into that. I'm going to go back in the history, kind of catch everybody up, and then say, kind of what's the real deal here, what's really going on, and what we can kind of do about it to kind of protect some of the information, and because there's some information that they will definitely be using to profit, and that's pretty much what their game is. We'll get into all that. Before we start there, though, I wanted to mention there's a columnist. He's a freelancer, but he writes. He has a column in Tech Hive for cord cutting. His name's Jared Newman, and we were talking over Twitter about the ridiculous article that we covered last episode. Well, there's two. It was one was about how no one's cutting the cord, and then the other one was basically saying that millennials are going to destroy the internet from all the cord cutting. Right.
And that was actually my favorite thing, is that it was I want these two journalists, I'm putting that in air quotes, that wrote these two articles to get in a Thunderdome style pit and just fight to the death.
Two awful journalists enter, one awful journalist leaves.
I think that's the only way to handle this, and that's how we decide the truth.
Yeah. So we were chatting over Twitter, and it was pretty much he posted another article, and I just tweeted back, and I was like, "Well, did you see this hot garbage from last week?"
Yeah, exactly.
And so then he was like, "Oh, those are terrible."
Right.
So he wrote an article about both of them.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the show notes because he had a really good takedown on all that ridiculousness as well. Some of the stuff we kind of covered on the podcast last week, but I really liked his take on it. Jared Newman, you should check him out. I'll put him. I'll link that one in the show notes. All right, so on to the business at hand. In case you don't know, Congress and Senate last week, basically took the FCC privacy rules. Which really, I'll get into that. Basically, there were these privacy rules that the FCC put in place under Chairman Wheeler. Now, the thing is they weren't really set to go into effect until later this year, because when it comes to, putting in regulations and policies like that, it's not like you can just flip the switch.
No, you always have to give a lead time in for the industry.
So What happened was, I thought this was going to come from Pai. Chairman Pai was planning on doing this.
This totally caught me by surprise.
And Congress kind of just shoved it in there, and they voted on it. Yeah. Now, if you look at the way the vote kind of came down, I think every single Democrat voted against repealing these.
Yeah, it was totally party lines.
Totally,
with the exception of
about
15.
Yes.
In the House, 15 Republicans broke with their party,
right,
and voted against
it. So it was a relatively close vote. I think it was like two. Was it 215 to 200, something like that?
216 to 205.
205. Okay, so because I knew there were some people who didn't
with
vote.
9 abstains.
Right.
So tons of moral courage on the part of the 9 that abstained.
Yeah, and then in the Senate, when they went, it went 50-48 because 2 withheld their vote. 2 Republicans didn't. I think Rand Paul was one. I don't remember who the other one was. And we kind of got into this a little bit last week, in last week's episode.
Yep.
But and this will probably go into law because it's been, I mean, the last hurdle is for Trump to sign it. He's already said he's gonna sign it. So, what does all of this kind of mean?
Well, before we get into the mean,
okay,
I would just like to talk for a second about Congress and this vote and kind of some of the motivations behind it, because like we've got some decent numbers from some transparency organizations out there. The particular one is called opensecrets.org, which is an entity, and they track who donates money to Congress,
right,
and then how they vote with that industry, or vote independent from that industry. And this is something we can link in the show notes, right? Like,
yeah, definitely will.
Yeah, so I mean, again, the donations, they're going to both parties, right? Like,
right. And these are, it's telecom and big cable. Like, it's the trade. They just changed their name.
Association.
Yeah, they changed their name because it was like it was cable and something, and now it's like television and internet. It's like we'll change it from things people hate to things people like.
Yeah. And it's still the same thing.
Yeah, and it's basically,
it's like saying arsenic is baby candy. Right?
Exactly.
Like, it's not. It's still arsenic, right? Like.
So they they kick a bunch of money over to Congress in hopes that they pass some preferred laws.
Yeah, and so where this is actually interesting, if you're like a data dork like me, right?
Same here.
Which I know you are. Looking at the Senate numbers, that pretty much is exactly what you would think, right? Like, they're more is contributed to the people who voted yes, right? Like, basically, it's that straightforward,
right? And Rand Paul has principles, so he just didn't vote.
And now, when you get to the House, this is where things get really interesting, and you can see it. There's actually in the article, there's a spreadsheet that's attached to it that actually shows like the average per vote type.
Yeah.
Right. And remember that there were, within the Republican Party, there were 15 that broke with the Republicans. Right. So the actual donations from the industry broke on party lines. But when you go inter-party and you look at the Republicans, the 15 that broke, they get considerably less from the industry than those that voted yes.
Yeah, it's almost like you can look at the money and kind of on the Democrat side, which to their credit, they get money too.
Oh, they get quite a lot of money.
Quite a lot of money.
But it is.
But they all still.
I mean, I'd have to do the math, but I think it's a good 25-30% less.
Yes, but they still get a size, and some of them, I think, because Steny Hoyer gets I think.
Yeah,
he's up at the top.
That's Maryland, right? Like, that's ours.
And he still voted against this repeal of these privacy rules.
That's exactly right. Dennis is right. He gets one of the highest donation rates from that industry, and somehow he had the moral courage to vote against that really bad law.
Well, I mean, I guess it does play to the narrative too of Well, especially, the Republican Party of late, it's almost like any oversight of business is bad.
Yeah, which again, not historic norm for the Republican Party.
Not at all.
Like so I think we talked about in the last episode that like privacy regulations in particular, right? Like, because they're in air quotes, they've always been the more business friendly, party.
Yeah. Chamber of Commerce usually sides with
exactly. But where they normally broke from that mold was around things like privacy and independent choice,
right,
and consumer protections. And to see that just erode
completely
is really surprising.
Yeah,
I don't get it. Right.
Yeah. So let me go into a little bit about this.
Yeah,
though, because I mean, we say privacy is some kind of blanket, term for what's going on.
But there are very specific things.
Exactly, and a lot of it too is because I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover here, and I'm going to kind of go through the history of what happened because what you'll hear the argument that the Republicans are basically making as it's not fair for companies like Facebook and Google and Twitter because they have less before this was even repealed. They have less stringent rules when it comes to privacy, and the ISPs, they said it's not fair that they have basically a higher bar to kind of live up to.
Right.
And I'll get into why that is a load of
it's ridiculous,
horse manure in a minute. But they basically want the ISPs to kind of fall under that same that rule set, which is very, very lax. It's not a lot of teeth there. So let's go back though and really talk about why there is a difference. Why there should be a difference between, and I mean, I know we've used the analogy before about, roads and stores on the road. So like your internet is the road.
Yeah, but it's pretty apt.
It is. But I mean, I really kind of want to go into like, we're going to go a little bit into, not too far into the weeds, but in a little bit of history here to kind of explain it all. So basically back in, I think it was 2002, let me pull up this thing here so I don't misquote.
The way back machine.
Yeah, way back in 2002, just after the 1900s, as my daughter would say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she tells me all the time, Daddy, you're from the 1900s. So,
she's right.
Okay, so in that's because 2002. I mean, the internet, the World Wide Web, really started in '95.
Yeah,
like it was a little bit before then when CERN actually put it all together. But in 1995, that's really when consumers started to kind of.
I think the marker a lot of people use, because it's a commonly debated thing, is right around there, and it's when Netscape
Navigator, yeah. So that hit, and it wasn't really until e-commerce really started taking hold to where they started worrying about these sort of rules where they had to take kind of like the offline rules for what do you do with your customers' information into an online space.
And just to be clear, like, people had been sharing information via their computers for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Bulletin boards and things like that. But up until you got more or less the modern internet, where you could start passing payments back and forth, that's when everyone goes, oh, well, we need to think about how contracts work in this and how taxes work in this, and et cetera. So.
Right. So in about 2002, the issue stems from how they're classified, because it gets down to who regulates what. And if it is just looked at as a trade or a business, it'll be regulated. The privacy protections will fall under the FTC, which is kind of funny because the FTC really doesn't have any privacy regulations when you really look at it. What they have is something they can basically they have jurisdiction if a company is misleading consumers.
Yeah, they have general use, like what do they call that? Truth. It's like truth in lending, that type of thing. But I mean, that's done through the Federal Reserve and the OCC. But yeah,
it's called unfair, deceptive acts and practices.
So
basically, yeah, if a company is doing that, then they can go after them. So usually, when the FTC goes after somebody for privacy, it's usually because they were misled. Like they've stated some sort of privacy protection, like you're going to give me this information and I promise not to do X. And then they go and they do X, and then the FTC can come after them.
Right.
Usually, if they don't say what
one way or the other,
then the FTC can, they can mention it and they can make a stink of it. But if it really went down to a court of law,
yeah,
there's a good chance that nothing's going to hold. Right. And that's kind of, and it's been mentioned, as everyone knows, the FTC, unless it is somebody, committing blatantly unfair business practices, they really don't have any teeth when it comes to the regulation. Okay, so that's really why I think ISPs are more than happy to be regulated under the FTC.
Sure.
And in 2002, that's kind of what happened, because at the time when they started to do broadband cable, like Comcast, and they started to sell internet, they classified that cable internet as what an information service. The FCC did this because they had essentially, before that, they had DSL, and then they had, telephone dial-up.
Right.
And both of those things kind of fell under what they would call common carrier.
Yep.
And common carrier is kind of just what it's an old common law term that really just means this service is going to be provided equally to all citizens without any discrimination, which is the difference between contract carrier, which is, as a business, I can pick and choose who I'm going to do business with.
And you can spell out terms in a contract.
Exactly. Where common carrier, you just name your terms and everyone kind of
it's
abides.
more of a utility service.
Exactly. So cable got this special consideration to be, a contract carrier. So for a while, you had kind of two different rules of the road. If you were DSL or dial-up, you're playing by common carrier utility rules. And if you're cable, you're regulated by the FTC. So the reason why I bring this up is because I consider this a massive mistake.
Well, and it's actually, from everything I've read, like generally within the IT community, it's considered a pretty big mistake.
Yeah.
And then they double down on it with the next thing.
Yeah. Well, let me explain why this is kind of a huge error. An information service must provide information.
Right.
The internet, in all its glory, is completely useless unless you have Facebook or email servers, or
there's no information moving around without
exactly
services.
That's really it's an information transport infrastructure.
Well, as much this is going to kill me to say, but as much fun as we like to poke at the late great Ted Stevens with his
do not agree with Ted
series
Stevens.
Of tubes. It's more accurate than the idea of thinking as the internet as a service.
Well, if you look at the OSI model, it's the Taco Bell tube. It's the 7-layer tubes.
There you go. And all I'm saying with that is that, tubes inherently don't pass anything back and forth, right?
Right.
His analogy is more apt than what current regulation
There's
holds.
lots of rules and protocols in those tubes. But
there's metadata being passed. But.
So when you say the fact that they declared this an information service, first off, I really don't even. There must have been some juicy telecom money Or like at the time, actually, it was cable TV. Money getting kicked in. And I know what happened. It was, the cable company, they're a service that sells television and information. Sure. We'll just lump in this other piece that they have into the same, into information service. So then, as Joel kind of hinted later, they doubled down twice when they brought.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because they did the same thing. They brought in DSL and dial-up in about 2005. They reclassified those from common carrier to information services, and then they did it again in 2007 for wireless data. So all internet was classified as information service, which means all privacy protection fell under the FTC because it's stated in the rules of the FTC that they have no jurisdiction over Title II common carrier. So if something is Title II common carrier, FCC has sway. If something is information service, FTC has sway. Now, lots of people lots of Republicans and Ajit Pai and the telecom lobbies like to obscure this and pretend that, ISPs and information services are the same thing, but they're not. They just aren't.
Well, and another thing that is, at least the impression I get from the argument, is that they like to talk about, well, they are regulated, right? Like they like to treat regulators as if they're the same, right?
Right.
And the two regulators have totally different approaches, totally different staffs, and totally different commissions, right? Like they can do different.
Okay. And let me explain why the difference is important. When you go to a website or you go to an application on the web or you go to, Facebook, they really are only going to see where you come from. Because if you click the link to go to them or you did it from a search engine, it'll actually show up in their data. It's called a referral, and it'll say, all right, this traffic came in through here.
Yeah, it's a to and a from.
And then they can say what you did, obviously, while you were on their site, because they have logs. And they can see if you clicked a link to go somewhere else, where you went. Now, it's a very simplistic view. There's some other complicated things. There's things called third-party cookies where those sites can have agreements with one another that says, like Google does this. This is how Google advertises to people. They'll basically, you'll have the website you go to will have a Google cookie in it. The Google cookie just basically gets a hit and says you visited, this. And it's when I say you, it's really your IP address.
Right.
Some companies do, keep user ID information. All of that should be spelled out in the privacy policy. Websites like mine do not. The only information I'm actually getting from a customer is if they subscribe to my mailing list, and then I have an email. But even that, it could be any kind of email. I don't really keep any personal identifiable information for my website. It's really just it's an address and what they did on my site, an IP address. So, and that's how most websites that are like mine, where it's like information context. That's usually where you're going to read the privacy policy to be absolutely sure. But really, that's all the data they're getting. The ISP, on the other hand, has complete view of every single thing you do on the web.
Yeah, and the way I think about it personally is like it's a simple point of view thing, right? Like imagine you're staring at a picture and you can see, a portion of it, right? That's the Facebooks of the world, right? Yeah. And depending on the size of the service, they can see more or less, right? Like, so Facebook can see a lot more than Grounded Reason, right? But they can still, meaning...
Well, just because they have a bigger user base.
Larger user base, exactly. But, when you talk about an ISP, they are backing up further, and they can actually see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, like you said, it's the to's and froms of... And that basically spells out what you're doing, right? Like, because everything on the web has a to and a from, like where you started and where you're going, right? And sometimes there's events triggered with that, and and so on. But an ISP, because of its position in the internet, can catch all of that for its clients.
Exactly. And I'll get to why that's a big problem. And why this really kind of affects that in a minute. But I also wanted to kind of point out that a lot of these services, these information services, the websites, the Facebooks, they're free for you to use from a monetary standpoint. You're not paying any cash to them to use this. And if you read the privacy agreement, the reason for that is they're going to be taking that information and they're going to be using it, the information
in varying ways.
Yeah, and it's the information that you've given them as you move about their site.
That's effectively their payment for the service.
Right.
Is your information.
Right. And it's not like that they're like using this information for anything really other than advertising for the most part.
Whereas the ISP already has both hands and one foot in my wallet.
Right.
Right. And so they're already charging me and everybody else who gets the internet. So from a strictly fairness perspective, it doesn't seem reasonable that they should be able to monetize other information that I would prefer they didn't, and most everybody else
We're
would.
Already paying them for access to the
internet.
internet.
We're already paying them, right? Like, so it's not like Facebook. In fact, it couldn't be further from it, right?
Yeah, and because like they're also like they have access to methods and techniques of getting information that your Facebooks and websites and other applications don't have. There's things called deep packet inspection where they can actually go into your packet and read the data. Like, go ahead and just read what it says.
Well, again, it comes from their position in the internet. Right? What they do is provide all of the infrastructure and therefore all of the subsequent tools that are used to pass your data back and forth.
Right. So your ISP, so Facebook just gets to see what you did while you're in Facebook. The ISP gets to see everything you did in Facebook, what you did, in Google search, what you did in Twitter, what you did, if you were looking at some of those websites you shouldn't be looking at, and then being able to connect all those dots.
Well, and I'll give you one more that really irks me. Right? Facebook, I can opt out of.
Yep.
Now, granted, I can opt out of Comcast or Verizon or whatever ISP, but in many instances, there are areas in this country, and there's a lot of them, where there's only one ISP provider.
Mm-hmm.
Or, wow, that's redundant, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Like ATM machine.
Yeah, exactly, right? But yeah, basically, like there is one ISP. And, so you could opt out, but you're living without the internet then. And that stinks these days, right? That is not
it's not even tenable. I mean, you can't live. I mean, yeah, sure. If you want to like live some type of alternate life that most people aren't living, like if you want to go off into the wilderness,
you can go off the grid
and
that's
kill
a thing.
And tackle deer, then then you don't really need
it's loads of fun.
Yeah.
Who hasn't tackled the deer?
Then you don't need the internet for that. But I mean, most people in the first world want an internet connection.
Yeah, and so that's one of the big things that irks me is that the argument that those types of companies are the same just doesn't hold water.
No, it doesn't hold water at all. And it's funny you should bring up the opt out clause, because actually that's a good segue into kind of getting into the rules of what was the rules, and what's going away and what's changing, because people will say nothing is changing, that since the rules weren't really in effect yet, that nothing is going to be different. We're really just losing this future where we were going to have more privacy. That's wrong. We're actually entering an area, and this is really due to some legal gaps and things that these people missed, the congressmen, when they decided to overturn this. They completely dropped the ball here because and I'm going to show you why there is completely no oversight right now when it comes to your privacy and your internet service provider. Basically, the rules for the FTC, because Joel, you mentioned opt out.
Yeah,
and that's really kind of a lot of the information we're talking about here. There is something called an opt-out rule where they have to basically provide a way for you to opt out of them using your information.
Right.
And all sites do, if you go and you look again in the privacy policy, it'll tell you. And it usually involves going, because 9 times out of 10, they're using Google's double-click cookies. I know that's a little in the weeds. And there's a way you can go to Google's website and just say, I do not want to be, tracked.
Right.
Or and you can opt out. And it really comes down to what information you can opt out of and what information you actually have to opt into to say what gets shared. Is defined by a very loose definition at the FCC, which basically means if sensitive information.
Right.
If information is sensitive, then you have to give them permission to use it. If information is not sensitive, then they have essentially, they have permission to use it until you say you cannot use it.
Right.
And those rules at the FTC came out of something called the Network Advertising Initiative, which is basically a trade of advertisers that sat down and basically they're self-regulating, and they said, here, we'll do this. And the FTC worked with them and said, okay, that's good. And it's essentially what I said. It sets up an opt-in consent for sensitive, opt-out for stuff that they consider
but the definition
non-sensitive. Right. And those definitions are really, this is what they define as sensitive. Social security numbers, any type of financial account number, real-time location information, and precise information about medical conditions. Then that's really funny, that definition there, precise, which essentially means the medical record itself.
Right.
And
not the diagnosis.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure.
Right. Well, and that's the whole point, is that no one's quite sure, right?
Yeah, they do. There's a lot
legal
of
argument.
But I wanted to draw that point because I was talking to somebody on Facebook. And they're like, oh, well, it's not like they can get my medical. You said you can get my medical. Because I wrote this all in an article that I put up on groundedreason.com. And somebody read this article and they said, well, they can't get my medical information. And I said, well, we've done a show on data analytics before, and,
absolutely.
And AI. And And I said, well, yeah, all they have to do is kind of piece together your data trail. They can look at what you're searching and where you're going, and they can figure out, they can diagnose you based off of your information. Yeah, and she said, well, what if I'm looking up stuff for 5 people? And I was like, aha, they have social link analysis.
Right.
They know who your friends are, and your friends are out there searching for stuff, so they know what your friends have. So all they have to do is say, oh, well, you're looking for this person.
In that case, they're going to back in.
And they're going to figure it out.
But basically, it would be very easy with the algorithms that currently exist.
And I just gave a very manual, simplistic way to do that.
I mean, honestly, I could do that in Excel.
Right. These
it wouldn't take
but these algorithms are like what I just said times 10.
Well, they're just much, much faster at it. Right?
They're much faster, and they can, like, where a human, if I'm dealing with 4 concepts, I need to make a chart.
Right.
Where this thing can just sit there and
just retains all of the logic that's built in by programmers over time.
Exactly. And not only that, but just the, in cop shows where they got to like put the string, like they do like the mind map where they got the string in the pictures. The computer can essentially do that in like a millisecond.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And it can put it so that big, map on the wall, it'll piece that, it can piece that together very quickly.
Really, really fast. And basically, it would be a combination of like looking for what medications you're searching for, what, associations you went to like very simple.
Not only that, but
relations.
Your ISP knows your geolocation information usually.
knows what types of doctors you went to.
Exactly, because it's especially if it's like if your phone company that you have is also your internet service provider,
which is quite common.
Yeah, that data can couple together.
True. Yeah, and so again, right? Like how? So an argument that I've often heard, and I've kind of used a little myself, is, "Hey, I'm not important enough for anyone to care to do that.
It's not you."
Right. It's my data.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that I, as a consumer, so 70% of the world's largest economy, which is ours, by the way.
Every American is important.
Yeah. And every American is important because we have much, much deeper pockets.
Yeah, we are
everywhere else in the world.
We're the world's consumer.
We are.
And it's so fun because I run, you've been to my website and everyone knows this. Websites, it's like magazines. They work on ads, The reason why I keep my site afloat is because companies will pay grounded
sell
reason.
Eyeballs.
Exactly, to advertise on my site. If I have an American audience, a US audience, that is like a primo audience. If you go to any ad agency for web, like if you have an American audience, it's like a gold.
Yeah, even if you look at like the Chinese economy, which is fast growing and the second largest in the world, right, per capita.
Now I'm not making gold money.
Right.
I'm just saying that like those are the most desirable people out there.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify.
Well, and
this office we're in here recording is 10 by 12.
Well, and it's like styrofoam walls, right? Like it's not. We're living large. I don't break the mystique.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's usually your job.
Yeah, exactly. So all I was saying is that like even if you look at like the other economies that are considered pretty prime real estate, like China, you could say, hey, they're fast growing, they're very large, and so on. But per capita, their consumers are much, much less affluent than the average U.S. consumer.
Right.
And then if you go the opposite and you look at, say, like the Scandinavian countries and things like that, where their consumers are very affluent. Yeah, that's true. There's just not that many of them.
Exactly.
Right? Like, so the U.S. is the Goldilocks zone of that. So, yes, Joel I am not a very important person, right? Like, so no one cares like they do with like Hillary Clinton or whoever, emails and so on, like about me, but they do care about me as a consumer.
Right. And like 10 to 15 Joels is probably worth one Hillary Clinton. And when it comes to consumerism and data.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say probably not my emails, but yes, yeah, exactly. But I would argue that like, you take any of our information in the States and frankly, might as well throw in Canada.
Yeah.
Right. The 51st state. Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
Anyways. But, you take any of us, we're extremely valuable from the person who's harvesting that data.
Right. And we're talking about a data profile here. Because they can take and they're like, well, Joel looks like this guy here. And they don't know him as Joel. They know him as his IP address or they could know you as Joel now because of what's just happened.
Right. Yeah.
But before
they can associate my name and my wife's name and my children's name.
Right. And all your medical information.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we've opened. And I'll say, because people are like, oh, well, no, because they're still regulated by the FTC. But no, they're not. I'll tell you why in a minute. So keep listening.
Oh, boy. And this one, if you really want to feel sad, this will make you feel sad.
Yeah. Well, so let's go, because this is kind of how it was, before Title II. And when I say that, I mean in 2015, Wheeler's FCC put net neutrality in place, and we've discussed net neutrality in several episodes in the past.
Yeah.
I think probably the best one we did. Actually, it was two. we like right after the election, episode 20, we had one called "Will Net Neutrality Get Trumped?" where we talk a bit about net neutrality. And actually, if you go back, actually the next episode, I'm sorry, if you go forward one, "Internet in Peril" was an episode that we did on one of Trump's transition members, Jeff Eisenach. And who, by the way, mentioned it. Like, we talked about this. Like, we said this would happen way back then in November. What exactly happened? It's just that the Congress did it instead of
which
FCC.
When I was talking about it earlier, and I was like, I was really surprised by that. Like, I don't want to overplay it. Like, I mean, we talked about it, right? Like, I did believe this was coming. Mm-hmm. I didn't think it would go through legislation. I just really
I didn't think they would
surprised by that.
I didn't think they would touch it because
it's just such a departure from what the Republicans have historically
and what Trump ran on. Trump ran on.
He was a populist, and
he ran on. We're gonna take care of the workers. We're gonna care about you. That's really it's about
as
you,
people,
right?
As
people, right? And here he is basically violating all of your privacy right now.
Yeah.
To, kind of line the pockets of Comcast.
Not kinda.
And AT&T.
Yeah.
Big companies.
You throw Verizon in there too. But it's not kind of
all of them
to line their pockets, right? Like Charter, you keep going down the list.
Right. Don't want to leave anyone out.
Like it is absolutely, this is a power grab. I don't call it what you want, but it is absolutely the industry taking over that vote.
Right. So the reason why net neutrality is important for this is because the FCC had to reclassify ISPs as common carriers so they can enact the rules for net neutrality.
Right.
When they did that, because the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, can't regulate common carriers, it created a bit of a blind spot. And they knew this. So they created these privacy rules
to cover
it. Now, the funny thing about it is, it's the same exact rules that the FTC has enacted, with really two exceptions. One, the FCC can actually do something about it.
Right.
And because they have rulemaking ability, in order for the FTC to kind of do something about some type of consumer protection deal, they need to basically prove that a number of consumers were harmed by this. And they can't just, if it's a one-off incident, there's really nothing the FTC can do. The FCC can see a one-off incident and say, oh, well, this could happen again, and make a rule to fix it.
And that would be that.
And it's done. So that's one big difference. The second big difference is because of the stuff that Joel and I were talking about on how the ISP sees all when it comes to what you do online, they were smart enough to classify your browser history and your app history as sensitive information.
Yeah.
Therefore, they cannot look at that stuff and piece it all together and create this huge library of data on everyone and basically undercut every marketing company out there because they have all this data that they can connect.
Yeah, and
so that's what they were going to do. Those were the rules that were going to go in place. That just got overturned.
Yeah, and I'm still a little, and it's been what, 4 days since the vote?
Yeah.
I'm still a little like flabbergasted.
Mm-hmm.
I just like that word. No one uses it.
No, it's kind of gone away.
Yeah. But by like this happening, like everyone on Twitter is losing their mind.
Yeah.
Right?
People remember how we were saying like a couple weeks ago, like it's a shame no one's paying attention to this stuff.
Right.
Well, everyone's paying attention to this stuff right now.
I mean, like some podcasts that I love. I'll give you an example, like Pod Save America.
Oh yeah.
Those guys are great. Fun one. You have to be a liberal person to listen to it, right?
Yeah.
And be able to tolerate it,
yes.
right? Like,
if
that's not your thing,
yeah. If you listen to what's his name over at InfoWars, Jones.
Yeah, Alex Jones.
Yeah, if you listen to Alex Jones,
you're not
you're
gonna
gonna
like Pod Save
pull
America.
your hair out. Listen to
Pod Save
America. I don't recommend it.
But even those guys, that's a big podcast. It's huge audience.
Yeah.
They started talking about this, right? Like, and it's because the vote is fresh, right? Like, that's why they're talking about it. But the context they were talking about it, and this is again what irritates me about it. The context they were talking about it was, hey, while the debate about the ACA and all of the Russia scandal and so on and so forth is going on, underneath that level, there's some pretty wild stuff that would be major news any other time in history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
in Soviet America, internet searches you.
Yeah, exactly. In Soviet Russia. No, and that's exactly that's not exactly right. No. But what I was saying is that like this bill getting passed to repeal all of this would have been front page everywhere, but we're in the time we're in.
Right. And so we have to deal with Russiagate
and everything
and
else.
Acha or whatever
just
that's called now.
Crazy,
the ACA repeal.
Crazy stuff. So, but I mean, like, people were flipping out on Twitter and on Facebook and, just even the regular news, you would hear stuff about it. And, I was talking to Dennis about it earlier and I was like, yeah, it seemed like everybody was saying it. What were you like? Oh, Nickelodeon decided they were gonna.
Teen Vogue just did. Actually, I joke about Teen Vogue, but Teen Vogue is actually all over the election. They were like, I don't know what happened over there.
Yeah, Vanity Fair put out a really sharp article.
Teen Vogue was actually, and I'm not joking, this is not a joke. Teen Vogue was probably better than CNN and MSNBC and Fox.
It's depressing, but yeah, and Vanity Fair, like I forget the Maya something or other, who I follow on Twitter. She wrote a really good article on this the other day, and so it's just like a lot of different media outlets are really talking about this, and people are following and making noise. So it's good to see that people have perked their ears up now that it's happened, but it's already happened.
Yeah. And the thing about this, too, we were kind of talking about this, is I think this is political suicide.
I do, too.
Because
I don't get
if you're a liberal or you're a conservative, this issue, you'll probably agree on this issue.
I know, like I have.
If you really looked at it, we didn't talk about Obama and whatever, or Trump or whatever, and you just laid it out and said, hey, this is what's happening. I guarantee you, no matter what your political affiliations, wherever they lie, you would probably wind up agreeing on this issue.
I am almost certain that we have a spectrum of people with different political backgrounds that listen. To this.
I would hope.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not certain, but I think so. And just based on some stuff we've talked about and seen in various comments, and given that, right, like I cannot believe that anyone that listens to this podcast and certain other ones that I frequent would not be outraged by this. So that tells me that, hey, it's not a political thing.
If you've been on Reddit, there is this, and I've done this. I've gone here. If you go into the dark underbelly of the Trump crew, and you go to the Donald subreddit, the Donald subreddit is like
you did that on purpose.
What's that?
You went to that subreddit
I went
on purpose.
Because this is what happened. This news broke, and then I read an article, like somebody mentioned that, the Donald is at odds on this one. So I was like, wow. And if you don't know, the Donald is where, like, that Alex Jones, Pizzagate
Pizzagate
story, which was ridiculous, came from. That really kind of got pushed by the Donald subreddit. And all that stuff, a lot of it's coming out of the Donald subreddit. Well, I went over there because I heard they were talking about this issue. They were at odds.
Of course.
And that was like the first time where, like, okay, no one speaks ill of Donald Trump in the Donald subreddit.
But they were.
They were like, what? This is like the one good thing Obama did. And they
yeah, and
that's
honestly,
what they were saying. That's what they were saying.
Here's what it comes down to is the First Amendment. And I say it that way because I want to draw emphasis to it's the first one.
Right.
Right? Is all about us being able to say what we want to say and kind of do what we want to do about assembly and so on. And all of that gets tamped down. All of that. I mean, like, settle the monetization.
Privacy and free speech, while
they're
they are
coupled.
What they are.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to speak your mind.
Yeah.
If you know people outside of your comfort zone, like your friends or whatever social area you're in, even if it's like you're a person on the Donald subreddit.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to say, oh, these people all agree with me, but hey, I might want to be careful because my ISP is listening to everything I'm saying.
Like, you eventually, if you're in those conversations of any sort, whether they be conservative or liberal or whatever.
Yeah, I'm just using the Donald people as an example.
You eventually get to know people's handles. You know them. Right? And so my point is, like, from a free speech perspective, right? Like, set the monetization stuff, which, believe me, irks the hell out of me.
Oh, yeah.
But set that aside. Just from a free speech perspective, this is going to have a chilling effect. It's going to have a chilling effect because of all the negative stuff that we all talk about the internet. And like, oh, people can comment without any repercussions and so on. It has a lot of positive effects too, right? Like, we get a lot of our dirty laundry aired on the internet because people can speak their minds.
Yes.
And sometimes, I'm guessing everybody knows this, but sometimes when people speak their minds, they say things that are not polite.
No.
And, and so that's what, like, the anonymity of it is used for. But now a big brother is going to know exactly who's who. And I don't like that at all. Like, that makes me really uncomfortable. And it makes me really uncomfortable, not just from the ISP, but it also makes me uncomfortable for future government overreach. Right? Like, because if the ISP is collecting that information.
Yeah, that's where it's really scary.
Which they previously.
You're one FISA warning away.
Well, dude, now, what? I mean, like, what if they don't have to have it?
That's true.
So my point is, like, with those rules in place, the internet service providers would have no incentive to gather that information at all.
Right. Now they have
a strong disincentive to. Now they have it. And now everyone knows they have it. And guess who else, who most importantly knows that? Oh, the government. Right? And I'm not trying to, God, did I borrow your tinfoil hat?
No, I think you did.
Yeah, that's not good. But I should get my own. But, like, to me...
You're like a liberal Alex Jones.
I am. Catch him in bed with a gobbler. Yeah, but I mean, like, and if I was anyone who had a controversial opinion of any sort, I'd be like, hey, I don't want, the government to be able to, or any company to be able. What if like us, Dennis and I, were saying nasty stuff about Comcast, and let's say we use them as our ISP,
right?
And they have, an agent that's looking for people that are saying nasty stuff about Comcast.
Right. I wouldn't put it past
That
them.
is not inconceivable. That's not even particularly hard to do.
No, it's really easy to do. All they have to do is listen to this podcast. No.
Yeah. That's kind of our lead-in, right? Yikes. So I'm off my soapbox, but good Lord.
No, I mean, it really, you've kind of just, I mean, that's the whole point of this. This is why it's important. It's why it's just not about advertising. It's not just about, I mean, which is bad. I mean, enough.
That stuff's really aggravating, but it's not scary.
And why I say it's bad is like, I'll excuse, I mean, and I hear I'm biased because I own a website. And, the website is funded because a little, 300 by 250 pixel ad shows up.
Every now and again.
When someone comes and visits, and it's no different than when you're reading a magazine and you have to go there and, there's
some
ad that you have. And it's just the, rules of the game. The problem with the ISPs having all this information, though, is it's kind of just handed to them.
Yeah.
They do no work. They put no, like, I write an article and people come and they look at it. I put time and effort into it.
Well, and the other thing is that, and we said this earlier, but like what effort they do put in place. Because I can hear people comment fingers are loosening up, right? And yes, fine. Comcast and Verizon and Charter and et cetera, they do put time and effort into creating the various, the tubes, right?
The 7-layer tubes.
The 7-layer tubes. But we're already paying them for that.
We already write a pretty fat check to them every month for that.
Every month.
And all the tax money that they've been given in subsidies to do this in the first place.
And all the money, I've said this so many times, but all the money that we as taxpayers paid to create the internet's original infrastructure.
Right. And the funny part about it is, if the ISPs really wanted to play the same game that all the people who, I mean, if we go back and we still pretend that, FCC rules are still in place, and so the ISPs don't get all this free data, they can put up a search engine. They could build an app. They do. They have these things. They have tools online that you can go use. That stuff falls under the same rules that Facebook, websites, and everything else do. The reason why they push so hard for this is because being oligopolists, they're pretty bad at competing.
Yeah.
They're not very innovative when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They can't keep up with your Facebooks, your Googles, your websites when it comes to that, in that game, in that marketing game.
I'll give you an analogy for it.
So they want an easy way to get the data.
Well, of course they do. And I don't blame them. I really strongly dislike them, but I don't blame them.
Well, yeah, you're running a business.
That's
what they need to do, yes.
So I'll give you an analogy for what they are when it comes to those services. I joke, and it's almost not a joke, that my wife domesticated me, right? Like she declawed and defanged me, right? And now I'm a domestic animal.
Right. Now you're the cat that sits up on the windowsill and looks at all the other cats outside.
And I'm like, wow, they look really mean, right? So if I was released back into the wild by my wife, right? Like, God forbid, I would all of a sudden not be able to, like, compete against it. I have been on a date in 12 years or whatever. I've literally no idea what's done.
Well, everyone uses Tinder now, I hear.
Is that
well, I don't even know what that is.
No, I'm pretty sure that's not what they do, Dennis.
That's what I hear. I hear everybody does that now.
Congress, I think they all do. But so yeah, anyways, and that's my silly little analogy for basically what Comcast is when it comes to all of their secondary services.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good analogy.
And that's where they fail.
Because they've kind of been in this little insular bubble of no competition.
Yeah.
Where and now they want to go into an area because they see all these, because advertising is a very lucrative business.
My marriage is an oligopoly. That's let's just say it, okay? And isn't that romantic? My wife is going to kill me.
She doesn't listen.
Does she? No,
not mine either. It's really exactly. It's a good analogy because. Really, that's what they want to get into this game.
Easy money.
They do. They see all these people making money in the ad business. And they're like,
an unbelievable amount of money.
Right.
What I'm a little surprised by is that the ad companies didn't fight this like tooth and nail.
A lot of them did. The problem is your big players didn't. Google didn't fight it, and Facebook didn't fight it because they already have so many. Because they're probably two of the bigger, like, remember what I said, like a third-party cookie I mentioned before, where they have, and if, like I said, if
that's their contingency,
right? Well, because to be fair, they have so many, like, you can take a Facebook script and put it in your app.
Yeah.
So when someone visits that information gets passed on to Facebook. Now, whatever. That's why you should read these privacy policies.
I've seen the result of it.
They see what happens, all your data. But again, while it is ISP-esque, it's not as powerful as ISP.
No, I will tell you right now. I bought a nice, like, you know, the razors that are the old school, like, safety razors that, you know, you froth up your face and it's a single razor blade that goes in. I bought one of those because I wanted to have one. That was really all it came down to, right? I think they're neat and I wanted to have a better shave. So I bought one of those.
Like a straight razor?
No, it's not a straight razor.
Oh, it's just the old
like one safety razor.
Yeah, before they started putting like 9 blade systems together.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, like, you can wash it as you shave and whatnot. Anyways, the point I was going to make is that, like, now, every time I go to Facebook, I get ads for
the razor.
Kind of razor. How did that happen? Well, I know exactly how that happened.
One of those sites you were on.
Of course, passed it along to Facebook. But I could very easily be like, well, I don't want to see these ads anymore, and sign out of Facebook and never log in again and be pretty happy on the internet.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, if you don't, that's the thing, is you can walk away from these information services.
Yeah.
You can't walk away from your internet service provider.
From the internet, right?
Right.
Not and be a happy person.
Exactly.
You could someone would have to have a gun to my back to walk me away from the internet.
Well, that's the funny thing, is anytime my wife like plans a vacation, my first question is there internet?
Right.
Like
right.
That's it. I don't, even before, like, what are we eating?
Right.
Do they have Wi-Fi?
Where is it? I don't care.
Right.
Do they have internet wherever that is? Right? Yeah, because I don't want to, you know, so I'm really, again, it's one of those things where I don't understand the mentality of the congressmen and women and the senators that voted for this, because I think this is gonna come out, and there's at least gonna be, like, what I mean is that this has kind of been done in the dead of night, right? Like, sure, the vote was done during normal times of day.
Yeah, but there was so much fire going on.
There was no pomp, there was no circumstance, and there was a house fire going on. So they did it, you know, under cloak of night, effectively.
Yeah,
and people, as they learn
under
about
cloak of healthcare debate,
exactly, right? And as they learn about it, are going to get madder and madder, especially when they start seeing their Facebook pages and whatever else getting spammed, and, you know, all the other stuff they can't even see happen start to have repercussions.
Right. All right. So to get back, you know, to Wheeler and Title II and net neutrality, that was enacted, just to, you know, recap a bit before we go forward. That was enacted, so the FCC made these privacy rules that we explained, where they kind of beefed up the thing on browser history, so ISPs didn't have free reign over the data, and that was supposed to go in place this year. A lot of people who voted this in, and I've heard senators and congressmen say this, that it's no big deal because these rules didn't go in place.
Right.
And the FTC will just, you know, still have their toothless rules that people will have to follow. Which, I mean, and I say that kind of jokingly because, companies pretty much follow FTC rules because no one wants the dust up. You know, even though it's kind of difficult for the FTC to enforce some of these rules, no one wants the bad PR that the FTC is kind of calling them out.
No.
Because, I mean, and that's what they do. They call out somebody, and then the company's like, oh, my bad, and they'll fix it.
It draws attention to
no one wants that.
malfeasance.
No one wants that. So that, I mean, to say it's completely toothless is kind of, hyper. It's a bit hyperbole. It's kind of like this unwritten rule that when the FTC yells at you, you comply. And most do. But the FTC has no power, and it kind of gets back to the way this works. Because remember, ISPs are still Title II.
Yeah.
The FTC has no jurisdiction. We're back in the blind spot. Currently, right now, there are no rules and regulations. Well, once Trump signs, no rules and regulations over privacy for consumers.
Right.
And I've also heard that people that have kind of woken up to this will say, oh, well, they'll fix that, just like Wheeler's FCC put these rules in place.
No.
Someone else will. Well, they can't because, and I did I actually mentioned this on the podcast a while back. I can't remember when, but I know I said it on the podcast.
You did, about the
AT&T lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right after net neutrality was enacted, like later that year, there was a lawsuit about the FTC going after some stuff that AT&T did with a service that wasn't Title II. I can't remember off the top. Well, actually, now it's Title II. It was with this is kind of convoluted. It was back when it was an information service, and then it got called over to Title II. But the case was dealing while FTC would have had jurisdiction.
Right.
But the court ruled that regardless of not if the issue at hand is Title II or information service, it doesn't even matter. If the company has any Title II service whatsoever, FTC has no sway.
Right. And that to me, first of all, is crazy.
It's insane. I think it's a terrible ruling.
Terrible ruling. But
and that Ninth Circuit, which is surprising, I think, ruled on that.
Yeah, but so you take that and you go, well, most of the companies that are ISPs also have some Title II service.
And that's really where I'm going here. And AT&T, Verizon, they have phone services.
Yeah.
Any phone service is going to be a Title II service. Here's the thing. Comcast just announced that they're putting out a mobile service this year.
Of course they would.
Oh,
I think I even joked about it on the previous podcast that, like, if you were smart, right, what you would do is if you're Comcast, you would start a little mobile service, not care if it makes any money. Right. And you'd make way more money out of
the data,
out of selling the data.
Right. And that's all they have to do is if you're Charter, just, go start some fly-by-night mobile phone service and you have a Title II service.
Or just go buy one.
And then you don't have to play by these rules. So right now, not only is there no oversight on ISPs, but in order for there to be oversight on ISPs, it's going to take another act of Congress.
Yeah.
Do you think the Congress that just voted this dumpster fire through, do you think that they're going to write regulations that affect these companies?
I know that's rhetorical, but I'm going to say no.
You have complete. So I'm going to say it. For a while, you're going to have ISPs with no privacy regulations.
Well, and let's bear in mind,
and that's the truth. That's not hyperbole.
That's absolutely that is not hyperbole.
Yeah, don't say I'm like losing my mind here. Go if you look at the letter of the law, and I'll link all of this in the show notes. The court ruled that
it's done.
And it's not like the executive branch can make an order that is going to overrule the court. That's not possible. The only thing that's going to be able to fix this is a law that's enacted by Congress.
Yeah, and so the other thing I was going with was, let's not forget that from the FCC's side, that this is where the chairman
that's what wanted.
wanted.
Well, he wanted to go to the FTC.
Yeah, well,
But
it's
that's not even possible.
Net the same effect.
It's
right?
really what we're talking about here is they've kind of played a regulatory agency shell game to completely remove all regulations from ISPs.
Which, again, is where he wanted to go.
When it comes to privacy.
He wanted to actually shift things over to the FTC and call it a day.
Right. This is worse.
This is actually worse.
Because there's no regulatory body.
Because it defanged the FCC, and it's a colossal mess.
It is. It's terrible. I mean, really, I've never seen a more... Now, if this was planned, it was a Machiavellian stroke of genius. I swear, though, it's just incompetence.
I think it's an unfortunate series of events.
Some lemony snickets going on.
Snicket type thing. Where you go, oh, somebody said, hey, you know what? This is going to be really unpopular if we try and do it through the rulemaking process.
Right.
Let's cram it through Congress.
Especially during this healthcare thing.
Well, the sky's on fire because the healthcare thing just blew up.
Right, let's do it.
Oh, Russiagate's going on.
The FTC will be able to do it. Oh, wait, there's the ruling what? Oh, I didn't know the court did that. Oops. That's kind of, I think, what happened.
I think you're absolutely right. So let's talk really quick about what are the repercussions? What are the things they can actually do with your data?
We've kind of danced around that a bit because they can connect all of it. I mean, if your ISP has all of your search history and they have every place you're going and they have your name and your address,
they can also download things to your phone.
Oh, well, that's the funny thing is there used to be this thing called Carrier IQ.
Yeah.
Which I think it was 2011, a bunch of phone companies they put it on the smartphones, and they were swearing it was for diagnostics, but it was pulling all kinds of information back. Well, FTC did smack them down for that because it was unfair business practices, and it was deceptive.
Right.
Well, Verizon, guess what? Not even 48 hours after, announced that they were going to be putting an app like that on phones.
Yeah. I mean, again, literally.
And there's no one's watching. FTC can't do anything right now. Yeah. They can't do anything about that.
Oh, actually, that's the way you said that's really important. It's not just that what I was saying where no one's watching. It's worse than that.
Yeah.
It's even if the regulators are watching, and they're really upset.
They can't do anything.
They can't do anything.
No one has any power over ISPs right now.
Authority.
Right. Because the courts are there's precedent there at the circuit court right below the Supreme.
I suppose they could try and some consumer advocate could try and push a lawsuit through and,
but the precedent is there already.
Yeah, I don't.
You're gonna need
that would work.
You're gonna need an activist judge that just says precedent be damned, and this is how it's gonna be. Which is I don't see many judges doing that.
No, it's uncommon, despite what people say.
Yeah, it rarely ever happens.
It's pretty uncommon.
So let's talk about because we know. I mean, basically, they can do whatever they want. I mean, that's what they could do in theory. In practice, the clear and present danger is your data when it comes to advertising, because that's really what they're interested in. And sure, they can go and they can take all that data, and it could be the scariest number 2 situation is, you've kind of you're accused of some crime,
right,
that you didn't commit, and all that data will probably go public. Or at least not go public, but, be pulled into an investigation because it just takes one FISA, warrant to pull all that data from the ISPs. Well,
because it's already aggregated.
Right. It's already there. So pretty much, you're living in one warrant away from surveillance state.
Yeah.
Not hyperbole.
No. I mean, frankly, let's say you were, a celebrity or another, public official or something like that, and the ISP caught wind of the fact that you were in some sort of scandal, and they decided they wanted to sell your data to the New York Times. They could do it.
Yeah. I mean, right now, especially because there's no
There's nothing stopping.
No one's going to stop them.
Yeah, would they do it? I don't know.
I guess. I mean, there's talk that it could fall under some wiretap law,
maybe,
but even that's kind of a stretch.
Yeah, I don't know that they would do it just because you'd worry about getting sued and whatever.
Because it would raise a stink.
Could they do it?
And that's what I'm saying is right now the only deterrence is ISP's own shame.
Yeah,
is really the only deterrence that's standing behind what they're going to do with this data. That's it.
It's like the scenario I just described.
We're trusting them to do to kind of, be okay, like to treat us okay. I mean, really, that's where we are right now. Right now, they're going to have all this access, and it's up to them to, how benign they're going to be.
Now, I don't use Comcast anymore, but let's just flesh out the thought you just laid out there. We're going to trust the company that one missed 3 appointments to put my cable in place and then kept me on the phone for 3 hours before I finally lost my mind and said, I will never, ever take your services
We'll
again.
be there between 1 a.m. and 11 p.m.
And next January, right?
There's there's a 23-hour window.
So we're going to trust them and their counterparts to treat us all well. That's what we're saying. Okay.
That's where we are.
That's the world we live in.
That's where we are. That's it. So what can we do? What can we do?
Dennis's head is in his hands.
Well, I mean, there's no substitute for the law in this case, because I'm going to give you, a couple tech tips. But even that
will help.
It'll help. It'll help because, like, Joel made this reference before. It's just putting locks on the door to make it more difficult to get the information. Yeah. But if they really wanted it, they could get it.
Yeah, and the real deal was where we were, where procedurally there was a disincentive for them to collect and aggregate the data.
Yeah, because they didn't know if it was going to fly in the face of regulation.
Right.
All that regulation's gone.
Yeah. So now all we're talking about is, can you obscure the data enough to, make it not a big deal?
Right.
And that's a pales in comparison to the other.
Right. So yeah, the law is always going to be the best. And from there, okay, easiest is go to frequent websites that use HTTPS. That means it's encrypted.
Right.
That won't, they'll still get you coming and going. Like you'll see.
But they can't tell what you're doing.
They can't tell what you're doing when you're within a site, but they can tell when you've gone to a site. It'll just show you the domain name. So for instance, Grounded Reason has always, for at least for the past 2 years, has been HTTPS. I encrypted it as soon as I could. So when you go there, what the ISP will see is that you went to groundedreason.com. You can click on pages, you can comment. They won't see any of that because it's all encrypted. Now, of course, they can do deep packet inspection and figure out, and possibly get through the encryption and figure it out. But they're not going to put that much effort into it. It's just not.
Again, you don't need to be faster than Bear.
Right.
You just need to be faster than the...
Right. And that's just simple. So any site that's HTTPS, they'll just catch you like where they'll see what sites you're going to. They won't be able to really see what you were doing while you're on them. Now, if you want to get a little serious about this, if you get yourself a VPN, which we talked about.
We have a whole episode.
We have a whole episode on VPNs. Actually, we did it, what was that, about a month ago?
Yeah,
a little longer?
I think it was 3 episodes ago.
Yeah, episode 35, 035. It's called VPN Privacy and You. Joel and I go over everything to look for in a VPN.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, in it, I cover, you want a VPN that has its own DNS.
Yeah.
I really don't have enough time to go into what that means right now and why that's important, but if you listen to that episode, I'll explain it. So you want to look for a VPN that has a first tier DNS that doesn't leak. And if you listen to that episode, I'll even explain
what leak means.
How to do a leak test. That's probably the most important. But if you go back and you listen to that one, it'll explain all the benefits and pros and what to look for there. The third thing is you'll want a browser that, if you care about cookies or like people dropping cookies on your system, because the VPN will pretty much keep you safe from ISPs from the most part. If you're worried about sites in general dropping cookies on your or tracking cookies on your computer, you can get something called Epic Privacy Browser, and I'll link all this stuff in the show notes. Really, it's a cookie blocker. It actually does its own encryption, so not only do you have a VPN encryption, but there's going to be a layer there on that browser as well. If you don't want to deal with the VPN, you could just get the browser, but I don't think that's enough because the VPN will actually encrypt any app activity too that you have or anything like that. Just like like say you're doing, you're streaming something, you're not using a browser. Then the VPN will handle that.
It's just like when you use your Works VPN, if you've ever done that.
Exactly.
Where effectively you're on that company's network, right? You're no longer in the broader network of the ISP.
Right. And I mean, that's where I am. I like the combination of a VPN and Epic Privacy Browser. A lot of folks out there swear by Tor, which is like short for the Onion router. And the reason why they say that is because what Tor will do is it'll bounce you through a bunch of proxy servers out there before you get to your destination. So it obscures and hides and encrypts who you are. And that's kind of what Tor does. The problem, and I say that Tor is great. I mean, it's fantastic. I find it to be a little slow.
Right. Well, it makes sense. It's going to more locations.
Right. That's just me. Don't yell at me. I know you privacy guys out there love Tor.
Yeah, I saw a debate you were having with someone on Facebook.
Right. And I don't think Tor's bad. I think Tor's fantastic. No, I mean, I just prefer to do the VPN Epic Privacy Browser. It seems a bit quicker for me. And I mean, it also matters on what VPN you're using. And I don't want to recommend one because it depends where you live and it depends on your situation, on how fast that VPN is going to be. Luckily, the one I use has a server not too far from me. So, there's that. Listen to the episode on VPNs and it'll all come clear. We don't really have another hour to kind of go over all the ins and outs of the VPN. I think
that's a decent little overview.
Yeah. So that's the world we live in now.
Yeah, and
where everyone needs a VPN. Honestly, I'm not joking there. Yeah. I mean, or at least you don't need a VPN. At least use Tor.
It's not a bad idea. That's what I would say. Is like, again, we talked about this a lot in the VPN episode. Like, you can go down the privacy rabbit hole quite a long ways.
Yeah, and I was joking, saying it was a bit tinfoil hat-ish.
Yeah,
but now not so much.
Yeah,
and that was only a few weeks ago. So things change quick in these times.
It's a weird world.
So I mean, now I guess that we've bummed everyone out.
Yeah,
maybe, if you need some consoling or maybe you have some questions about VPNs, you can follow us on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's, one way, or you could email us at, what is it again? Oh, it's podcasts@groundedreason.com.
You set up the account.
I know. I forgot. It's been a week since I've had to, say that address. Follow us on the Facebook page. Actually, I shared the article I wrote on VPNs. It's getting a lot of comments. You can ask questions there.
Yeah.
You can go to the website.
It's a good lively discussion there.
Yeah, it is. You can go to the website. You can throw a question in the comments. I'm waiting for your questions there. The Christopher.
Yeah.
Guy every week. Yeah.
Like clockwork, man.
Awesome.
My hero.
So, I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, really, if you want to throw a question our way, we'll, air it on the show.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, like, again, it's a community of people trying to figure all this out.
Right.
And sometimes, someone brings something up and it starts a whole new way of thinking.
We've done whole shows on questions before.
Yeah, we have.
If you like what Joel and I are doing here, the best thing you could do, subscribe.
Yeah.
You subscribe to the show, and I know I've said this before, if you listen all the time, you've heard, it's like I'm a broken record. But when you subscribe, we go up in the rankings. People see us in the iTunes rankings. and they become listeners. And the bigger the show gets, the longer this thing will go. It's what keeps the ship afloat.
That's right.
People listening. You can leave reviews. We just got a 4-star review. We have I want to thank everyone out there who's left a review.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten all 5-star reviews except for 2, and those 2 were 4 stars.
Well, and honestly,
and those were good. They
I
said
would thank those people too, right? Like
they do. I thank them. I'm not.
Don't criticize the 4 stars.
I do love the 4-star reviews. I appreciate those 4-star reviews. And actually, the 2 4 stars we had, one didn't leave a comment. The one that did leave a comment, it was a nice comment. They said, the show never bores. His problem was it gets a little in the weeds sometimes, which I don't disagree with.
Yeah, we kind of do.
But I'm just letting you know, we're coming for those 2 stars, people. So
yeah, we want our stars.
We're going to come and get our stars. All right. All right, this is Dennis Rostaro.
And this is Joel Reeves.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah, seriously, take care, because you're going to need to take care in this mess we currently live in.
Don't steal my line.
No, I'm owning your line. No. Later, everybody.